What's going on, guys? So I've had some requests to do another whiteboard video on the freedom front, you could say. And I think the most important video that I've done is the Cestui Trust video. And it's been, 6 months to a year later, and I could probably articulate it a lot better and a little bit faster and in a little bit more layman's terms for you. So I rewrote the Cestui Trust video up, and we're going to talk a little bit more about the birth certificate and social security account for you parents out there that don't really understand what these two things are, your birth certificate and social security account are. I'm going to explain to you exactly how the world works in banking, law, and all that good stuff in our courts. And we're going to start at the hospital. So we voluntarily walk into these hospitals to have our babies, right? Well, that's where these birth certificates start, and then the social security account comes shortly after that. A birth certificate is a bond. It's on bond paper. It has a CUSIP number. It's a security. It has an identifiable number to where you can locate this bond on bond paper on a stock exchange, for example. So a birth certificate is a bond on bond paper. A Cestui Trust account is also the type of social security account you have. This comes shortly after this, okay? And your social security account that your social security number is attached to is technically a Cestui or Cestui Trust account. However you pronounce it, everybody pronounces it different. We're not taught this stuff. Cestui, I'll say, trust account. That is a trust account, guys, okay? And it starts here. So what happens is they come up to you, you're drugged up maybe on painkillers, and they give you a stack of papers. They say, pick a name, and here's a stack of legal paperwork, and they want you to sign here to register your baby with the Department of Human Resources. We are literally, unknowingly, under duress, without full and honest disclosure, giving title to your baby to the state as a human resource. A human resource. You ever thought about that? We're literally human resources, all right? And so you get registered at the registrar's office. What gets registered there? Property. You're registered as technically a vessel, or in the law, an entity in legal, or a transmitting utility. Wow, transmitting utility. That gets me crazy, down a crazy rabbit hole relating to us being electrical and actually antennas, okay? You're a transmitting utility. That's interesting. That's a deeper discussion. But you're bonded and insured and placed in trust, okay? And then from that point forward, once they've done all this, you're forever bought and sold as U.S. Treasury bonds under LEIs, which are identifiable numbers, and through all the bonds and CUSIP numbers attached to your account, that becomes the full faith and credit of the United States. So if you ever want to know what the full faith and credit of the United States really is, what our fiat currency is really backed by, it's backed by you and your children through this system, okay? I'm going to flip this over, and we're going to get into it. We're about to get serious. Here's my original, David Straight style Cestui Trust video format. So let's go over some things first again. IMF, that's the International Monetary Fund. CQV, that's your Cestui Trust. CUSIP numbers, those are the identifiable numbers so you can search bonds and securities. In the world of finance. Birth certificate, we know what that is. SSN, Social Security number, trust account. We know that your Social Security account is a trust account, okay? So we've got those identified. We've got fiscal services, U.S. Treasury bonds, probate, straw man, full faith and credit, balanced accounts. Okay, we're going to start. We're going to get started. This is the real deal. So what happens? After you get your birth certificate and your trust account is started, the way our country is set up, our corporation, the United States is a corporation, is we have a public charitable trust. And underneath this umbrella trust, corporation trust, we have about 300 million individual Cestui trusts, which is the citizens of the population. These are all the people in the United States, okay? And we have all those Cestui Trust accounts. And when I say accounts, I literally mean it. There's debits and credits. And we have a balance sheet in relation to our trust accounts, all right? So what happens? The first thing that happens is U.S. Treasury bonds are issued and sold, bundled, hypothecated on the stock exchanges. What do I mean by that? So the International Monetary Fund is the originators of this slide. They do the investment. They have the original investment You know, when you're bonded, the IMF is the original investor. Say it's $1 million. When you were born is how much the investment was. Before 75, I believe it was like $630,000, and you're bonded and insured for a different amount. But like for me, after 88, I believe I was bonded for $1 million and insured for 2. Example. This number is not important because everybody's is different according to your age. So again, the IMF is who's loaning this money, who's creating these bonds. They're loaning, okay? And what happens is these credits go onto the ledger in your trust account, and then the debits, the cash, goes out into these national banks and it gets thrown out into the economy, all right? That's where the original loan comes from. These national banks get this. This is where we're printing money from, all right? So remember the difference between credits and debits in this world. You have a balance sheet and people don't realize it. We think that this is all that exists. You know, our day-to-day life, we have mortgages, we have auto loans, we have medical bills, we have food and utilities we got to pay for. We have all our life's transactions, but really we don't understand that we actually have a value to our body that creates that full faith and credit of the United States. And here's the credit side. People don't understand. So what I really want you guys to understand is that your money is not lawful money. It doesn't have true value. It's fiat. So your cash, the cash that you have is actually an IOU. It's legal tender to be tendered at a later date. It's a negative debt instrument. So all the money we've ever used in our life and we've purchased anything with, Fiscal Services has kept track of it. Fiscal Services has kept track of all transactions throughout our life because the only money we've had since like 1933 and forward has been this fiat currency that's not backed by gold or silver coin like it should be and have true value in the U.S. code. So we haven't had money, real, true, and lawful money since, and we've had this. This is how we pay for things. So say throughout the course of your life, you pay for a mortgage, you pay for an auto loan, you pay for some medical bills, many auto loans probably, quite a few mortgages probably a lot of food and utilities, and all your life transactions are going to be negative debt instruments because all of our money that we use to pay with is fiat, it's legal tender, and it has to be tendered at a later date, and that later date is death and probate. So all the money you spend in your entire life, say $50 million, has to be accounted for because that's a debit before this can be balanced and these people can cash out. The entities in control of these systems can cash out. And what do I mean cash out? Where's this other money from? Where's the credit side of this? What's on the credit side of this balance sheet? So your birth certificate is a bond. It's on bond paper, right? You can actually look up the value of your birth certificate on the stock exchange if you know how to identify the CUSIP number, which I did over a year ago. You have a driver's license, you're bonded and insured. That has a CUSIP number. Your college degree, your college ID, student ID, is a CUSIP number. You're bonded and insured when you go to a state college. Military, really good bonded and insured. You're bonded for big bucks and insured for big bucks. Your military ID is also a CUSIP number because you are being traded. And they own those estates. These militaries own their estates with their trust accounts inside of that. The government issued licenses. All licenses are bonds. They have CUSIP numbers to them. All court cases are CUSIP numbers. That's a tricky one. All court cases, the numbers are actual CUSIP numbers, all right? And you can identify these bonds attached to these court cases. Any bond has a CUSIP number, really, that you can identify if you know what you're doing. So say you've been a good little citizen and you've been valuable to this system, to them, and you went out and you joined the military and then you got a college degree. When I say bond, imagine these numbers for each one of these, okay? And all these bonds are traded on stock exchanges all over the world your whole life and you don't know it that exists. And so imagine you have all this money. Each one of these are separate bonds with crazy values, and those bonds are bundled and hypothecated and invested your entire life on a ledger that you don't know about, and that's what creates the value of you and the full faith and credit of the United States. And that's a lot of money. $250 million is common. Let's use Chris Hauser, for example, if anybody knows who Chris Hauser is. You know, he was at upwards of 200, I believe it was a 200, almost $300 million Cestui trust value because he knew how to look into this stuff. He knows how it works. So say you have a $250 million value to your credit side because you've been a good little citizen. You have all that stuff, and they've hypothecated it over your life on the back ledgers. And you're worth $250 million in real credit. That's the credit side, remember. This is the fiat side. But say you have spent $50 million in debt instruments your whole life. All this stuff you've purchased, people think this is all that exists. This exists and you don't even know it. You're not taught about it. You're not talking about it as an attorney. You're not taught about it in finance. You're never taught about this stuff. This is very special information that's very hard to understand and learn. And I had to go meet special people to really dig in and understand this. All right? Again, so if you're worth $250 million through all your bonds and your Cestui trust, and they made you you're worth that much, how can they get this money? This is what everything's about. Everybody wants this money. How can they get that? At death and probate, the district clerks are the accountants. Fiscal services are the bean counters. So at probate, if they want this money, or any of it, the state wants any of this money, they have to pay this off. And they have to pay off the original loan from the IMF. The original loan from the IMF, say it was $1 million, plus interest. Plus interest. So in order to get this money, which is what really funds governments, when you see billions and then all of a sudden trillions, that is a massive leap that mathematically you haven't grasped yet. If you want to get into the trillions, when you see those numbers with the T's, this is where it comes from. If you have 250 million times 300 million, now you have those kinds of numbers. That's where that money really comes from. So, say you had you're worth the 250 million on your credit side. We're at death and probate. The district clerks, the accountants are trying to balance this account so they can all get paid and the state can get their money, all this stuff. And this is what's going to be left. The original loan has to be paid off. The original $1 million plus interest. I didn't add it up. I just rounded it off to 10 million plus your debts. So say you had 250 minus 50 million minus 10 million for interest plus the original loan, there's 189 million left in your Cestui trust, which goes on in perpetuity forever. So this 189 million is what really funds governments and what courts really want. This is what they want to get their hands on. That is what governments want to get their hands on. This is what courts want to get their hands on. So at death and probate, they have to sweep the credits over and pay all this, pay everybody back, and then the account's balanced, and the account is balanced, and then they can start playing. And by the way, these go on in perpetuity forever. So every Cestui trust account that's been, initiated since 1933 is still going on in perpetuity forever. And I'm almost positive that that's how we have dead people voting. These voters, they're voting for, this is corporate fiction stuff. How do you have dead voters? Because of this, because their trust, which is their straw man, their corporate fiction vessel, their all capital letters name actually goes on in perpetuity forever by the way it's constructed, okay? So, that was a lot. I articulated it very fast. Let's go over it one more time. The IMF loans the original money for the birth certificate. You're bonded by them. They're the originators. Cestui trust is the type of trust your Social Security account is. CUSIP numbers, we know what those are. How to identify the securities on the stock exchange, etc. Birth certificate, trust account, we know what that is. Constructive court system. Ooh, this is a good one. How do the courts, which are banks, look up court, it says see bank in Black's Law Dictionary. Look up judge, it says see banker. Look up clerk, it says see banker. These are administrative courts. They're not courts of law. There's no injured parties. It's literally banking and back and forth. You have to understand what's really happening. They're trying to get this money. The courts, the constructive court system, your local administrative courts, your Article I courts, are trying to get this money. They just want money from your trust account. They don't give a shit about injured parties or the law. They truly don't. It's all banking and you pleading, and that's a whole nother conversation. But this is how it works. A constructive court system, when they do this, when you have a court, this CUSIP number, okay, court case number is a CUSIP number, they create a trust in your name. It could be Spencer M. Barr in all caps, or Spencer, my full name, Barr. And so if they don't get what they want out of the case and say I beat them, they're going to open another case and change it, okay? They open a trust account in your name through foreign brokerages. This is true. there's 3 bonds that they put in this trust that they create for your court case, okay? They have a bid bond, a performance bond, and a payment bond. We're not going to get too deep into that because that's technical. But just know they're creating an account and they're putting bonds in this account, this trust account, and they're trying to make you, they're holding you surety for these bonds. This is what we call debtor's prison, okay? So you can be held as surety for these bonds as the trustee mismanaging your trust, which is your straw man, your all capital letter name. If you don't know what a straw man is, this is way too advanced for you. Your all capital letter name is your corporate fiction vessel. All of your bills come in that. Everything is in all capital letters because that's how you're dealt with in commerce and in the public. That's not in the private. Living men and women have uppercase and lowercase names, and they autograph. Signatory officers sign in commerce for their corporate fiction vessel, which is your all capital letter name. All right? And so, like for example, the state of Florida, Ron DeSantis is like the CEO for the state of Florida. He's a signatory officer, the head signatory officer for the state of Florida, which is a corporate fiction vessel. All right? This is how this works. You have that constructed court system. They have this. They just want to make money off this. They want to get money from here. And how do they do that? These bonds, they have a securities and exchange system to where they send these bonds really quick over to Wall Street. They liquidate them really fast. They come back, okay? These bonds are being liquidated out the back door and you don't know it, okay? These courts are banks. Some of them are ran just like McDonald's franchises. They are not courts of law. They're literal banks. And what they're doing is they're going to liquidate these bonds out the back door at Wall Street really fast, because remember the jurisdiction of Wall Street, where it's located. You know, understand D.C. as a foreign territory. Understand the location of Wall Street and how strategic it is and related to the United Nations, Empire of the City, all that good stuff. So they're liquidating these bonds in your court case attached to your name, and they're going to collect net retentions. If you've got $8 million in fraud charges, 4 counts of $2 million in fraud, and they've got $8 million on the charges, okay, that they're trying to get, what happens is the judge is going to get a net retention of $90,000 to $100,000 for this conviction, for this positive, net positive. That judge, this is how the judge gets paid. It's called net retentions, okay? I call it commissions. So it has nothing to do with the law. They're trying to get paid. They can slap you on the wrist, give you a little fine, and you're like, oh, that wasn't so bad. But they just took millions from your trust and you didn't know it. But then there's private for-profit prisons that are involved with corrupt judges, involved with corrupt court systems, involved with these corrupt banking court systems held like McDonald's franchises, and they actually already statistically know how many people they're going to send into prison and who, because they have artificial intelligence that scans through it all. And sometimes it's pretty predetermined in these courts. They're very advanced. And they'll send you to prison, okay? Because they want to get paid. These private for-profit prisons, when you're there, are milking this. The prisons are milking this. This is how they get paid. Once you go to prison, you're bonded and insured again when you're in there. So then they have access to your trust account. And every day, say it's $10,000 a day, they're getting $10,000 a day every day you're there coming from that account, all right? That's how it really works. We've got to understand the difference between legal tender versus lawful money, all right? Legal tender is fiat. It's the full faith and credit of the United States. Our fiat is based off of us. It's based off of our birth certificates. Remember, the full faith and credit is based off your potential sweat equity as a debt slave to the system. Your Cestui trust and bonds are attached to that. So the full faith and credit is based off of you, and we're debt slaves to our own currency. And our future is basically based off of this system. We're always going to be debt slaves to our currency. Our kids are going to be debt slaves to this system and always in the jurisdiction to where they can get thrown in here. And there is no justice. There is no law because it's just banking. It's an administrative process. Administrative, think banking. Standard banking procedure. All right? So remember, debits are negatives. Credits are positives. Legal tender, lawful money. What's the difference? One has true value. One may be based off gold and silver. Okay, there's true value. Say it was based off of oil, the Middle East. If this is based off of gold and silver, it has value. This is not based off of gold and silver. This is based off of potential sweat equity, which is a debt. That is a debt, okay? The future, you're being held You're being held as a debt, as a debtor. This is a negative. This is a positive in the law. That's how our U.S. Code reads. So, what is lawful money in the U.S. Code since 1933? It's always been gold and silver coin. So, how does this really work? There's systems where people that I know, this is a number line. I know it's really small. Hear me out. I have a 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 to a million. 0, -1, -2, -3, 4, all the way to -1 million. If I've told this on the other video, if you have a silver quarter, which is silver coin, that's lawful money, it has something called true value in the law. So 0.25 of a dollar, which is a silver quarter, is positive on this number line. But if I have $1 million in cash, okay, which are IOUs, legal tender, to be tendered at a later date, that -$1 million is actually less than this in the court of law if you know how to utilize it. It is so extremely hard to do that. Good luck. You'll spend your life dotting your T's and crossing your I's to pulling that off. Yes, we know somebody that has discharged almost a $500,000 mortgage with a silver quarter. She opened her own case and knew exactly what she's doing, and she does it all the time, full time. She's always beating the court systems. So, understanding legal tender and lawful money is very important. That leads into lawful money redemption, which some of my friends and I myself have had some decent success in lawful money redemption and understanding it. So, this is how the world really works. It's all about this money. So, this is what's left over after death and probate and in your Cestui QV trust forever. This is what's there while you're alive that everybody's tapping into and dipping into. You don't even realize it. This is what you think reality is. This is just surface level. This is just the debit side. This is the credit side of the Cestui QV trust and how everything matters. All right, did I miss anything? Constructive court, that's got to be a whiteboard of its own. We know legal tender versus lawful money. You've got debits, credits. This is your balance sheet. It's got to be swept at death and probate. How do we balance the account? The original loan plus interest and your debts, your debits, and full faith and credit. We know what that's based off of is this system. Full faith and credit is based off of us. Straw man is the slang term. You know, a lot of state nationals aren't using straw man. Old school state nationals or state citizens use straw man a lot. It was a common term. But if you say that, that's in legalese now. Don't use that term. It's like a sovereign citizen. They own that term, and you'll get screwed in the court of law using it. But that's a slang for your corporate fiction vessel. That's your all capital letter name. Awesome. Don't forget birth certificate, social security number. Don't give the state your children. Do not sign the title to your children over to the state. Make them work for their jurisdiction and fight. Fight for jurisdiction, okay? Understand how you're owned. Understand how the world really works. I don't need to fight anything. I'm at peace and at honor, and I'm out here living free because I've learned enough on how to avoid all these systems. I know how to stay away from all this stuff, and it's important to me to stay away from all this as much as possible. No, I don't want address numbers at the front of where I live, where I sleep. No, I don't want a mailbox. No, I don't want to use certified mail. I'd rather use registered. Public and private. Living in the private is important, all right? So, this is how the world is really working, and you've never been taught this. I don't care what your degree is, unless you're in one of those Ivy League schools, in some closet law classrooms and all that stuff. Maybe. I don't think you have any clue how this really works. You didn't know about this until you watched this video or my last video or David Strait. Nobody's ever explained it in that detail. Don't forget how important it is to know what these are. All right. Peace, guys. It's been good.